Hello, I'm Somi Arian. I'm a tech philosopher, author, filmmaker, and the founder of Impeak. My guest on today's podcast is Sebastián Brocher. He's an artist, entrepreneur, engineer, and the founder of StudioUno, CryptoArte, and ChimiChurri. I met Sebastián on the Proof Collective Discord, and we got to talking about generative art, and I thought I should really introduce him to my audience. So Seb, how did you get started with art in general? Tell me a little bit about yourself, because I came into Proof and I saw your name as one of the artists, and then I saw you sometimes posting. So how did you get started, and how did you make it to the point where you actually became a Proof artist? What does it mean to be a Proof artist? So let's start with your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to chat and be here. I'm originally from Argentina. I'm an engineer by career, artist by heart. I'm also an entrepreneur, and so I have this a little bit of fun mix going on. In terms of art, I always been like very creative. And my formal education on art is actually music. I studied piano for 5 years. And so I actually never studied visual arts, but I always had like, kind of deep admiration. And, most of my kind of start on what would be like visual arts is really linked to computer science, right? So it's kind of this mix of engineering and creativity, kind of with mix of the music background, right? That really drives it. From an inspiration perspective, most of the themes are either computer science, right? So trying to visualize or trying to kind of tell the story about technology and different kind of computer science concepts. So I have different work that kind of builds on that. But I also get inspired a lot by kind of other engineering or mathematics, science topics in general, right? Like if you look at my sketchbook, I have a bunch of different ideas, and a lot of them are actually either coming from like science or math or computer science or engineering or physics. Anywhere from like the universe and the n-body problem or like a physics problem, all the way to some algorithmic problem, and in between, and also sometimes nature as well. So those are kind of my inspirations as as far as art goes, and like really how it came to be. It's kind of this to me, it's like this really really fun space where I get to mix both my artistic creativity and inspiration with the engineering. That's kind of my sweet spot.
That's really super interesting. I'm also deeply into everything to do with technology, physics, the universe, all that stuff. You probably have seen some of my posts on the Proof Discord, sometimes talking about like the simulation theory and physics and stuff. So how does one become a digital artist? Oh, you said that you're both an engineer and an artist. Would you say you are more of an engineer or more of an artist?
Oh, that's a difficult one.
Because if you are a digital artist, I'm guessing you need to be almost equally both. But at the same time, there must be one side that's kind of like stronger.
Like more prominent. Yeah. Well, I guess I spend a little bit more of my time in, entrepreneurial and engineering activities in general. But maybe what I like the most is more of my artistic part of the equation, right? So I actually enjoy more doing art. That so Web3 has changed this drastically, right? And then we can go into that. But like basically, having being successful in art is very very difficult, right? You have that kind of power law type distribution where very very few folks make it, to have like a significant income and like have like a good living, and they can actually focus on art, right? And then you have this huge long tail of like some extremely talented artists, right? Like that never make it, and they all have to have like, like a side gig or some other job, or end up, teaching or doing other things that they may or may not like, or may just do it just so that they can support themselves, right? So I think from growing up, like from my early childhood, my heart was really into, becoming a musician, becoming an artist. But then, my brain was like, hey, I want to be successful. I want to be comfortable, live a good life. And, the kind of social fabric kind of starts pushing you, as you grow as a kid, you're like super creative. You're like 3-4 years old and you're drawing all over the place. And then as you start maturing, like kind of that social fabric start, pushing a lot of people towards like more kind of safe bets, so to speak, right? Like, hey, engineering sounds pretty safe, and I really, really enjoy it as well. So I think that's probably what happened.
So at that time, when you started going into engineering, you didn't know that one day you will be able to combine your passion for art with engineering. You didn't know that, did you? You've discovered it later.
I didn't know that I was going to be able to, be successful in making any money with art. But I knew it was possible. Like the intersection was there because as a kid, I had already like programmed music on like the Commodore computer. So there was a lot of inspiration already, and exploration of like what you can do with computers in terms of computer graphics and music, even early on for me, as a kid, right? Like, so, but I would just do it for fun. It was like never, meant to be a serious thing. Like, when like you used to play around with like the music software like Cakewalk and like some of the old, digital, audio workstations and hardware just for fun. Like I would compose music and record it. I had a band with friends and play the piano all the time. But all my artistic endeavors at the time were just for fun. Even if like I may play live in some little gig or something, it was just for fun. I never considered it a career. So I was always into entrepreneurship, and engineering was kind of my career, and art was just something that I did for fun on the side. I knew there were intersections, but I never thought about it as like, hey, that's part of my career, right? It was kind of like, hey, I can use computers to help with my art and vice versa, right? Like my artistic inspirations sometimes happen, bring ideas in the field of engineering as well, right? But I never thought about that combination as part of being actually part of my career, right? It was kind of two different worlds. Like this is my job, this is my career, and this is something I do for fun, after.
So how did you discover that you could combine the two? And can you explain in the process as you're explaining that what is generative art, what is digital art, and when did this start to become something of interest to people that they decided that that this is valuable, that, to pay for and to kind of think of as art?
There's a lot there. Let's try and unpack it, right? So like in terms of like generative art, I like to think about it in very broad terms, right? Like kind of the more classic type of understanding, or not definition, because it's I don't know how it's not easy to like define it, right? But the way I think about generative art is this idea of, as an artist, what you do is you don't necessarily create the art, but you create a system, and that system can react to its environment, right? So whatever input signal that is, it could be as simple as a sculpture that is reacting to the light from the sun, right? And then you can see some art being formed in the shape and the textures and the colors and however that is designed to provoke that, right? So it can be as simple as that, or it can be a more sophisticated version of that. Say like people used to like hack the old cameras, right, and change them so that they would produce art instead of like the quality of the photograph that they would typically take, right? So that's also, for me, generative art, right? Like the artist is building a system and then the system is absorbing input signals from the environment and producing art as the output, right? So that's kind of like the more, I think, a broader definition of generative art, right? As we move on to Web3, that input tends to be either data or some random variable, right? So a lot of the generative art that you see on Web3, on NFTs, is basically algorithmic versions of those systems, right? They're algorithms. And most of the times the input comes from a randomly generated value. Many times that randomly generated value is generated by the blockchain itself, right? Not all the times. And then, what's produced on the output sometimes is visual in terms of, it may be a still image painting, or it can be animated, right? Or it can actually be music as well, right? Sound. So you have artists that have done that, and also a combination of both, right? Or whatever media you can generate, right? So that's kind of more of like, I guess, the take but for me in terms of generative art on the blockchain or Web3, right? The overarching principle still applies, right? Like the input can come from different places, and the output can go into different places and be stored differently as well, right? But the underlying idea of like using NFTs or ERC-71 to can store that represents the art and all the interoperability and provenance and all the the immutability and everything that comes with it, right? So that's kind of how I think in terms of like generative art, NFTs, and Web3 NFTs in general, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely, it does make sense. Do you think the fact that you were quite early in this space, it helped you become established as an artist? Do you think, like, for example, if you started now, you would find it harder?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot more players, right? A lot more noise, right? And so it's harder. It's harder for artists that aren't already well known to become known on the space, right? Because there's already that many. So and that's actually something I'm working on one of my projects right now. We can touch on that later. But I actually have an art platform where it's called StudioUno, where a big part of it is helping up and coming artists and kind of lifting them out and like curating new artists and those up and coming artists that are having a hard time to get on the space, right? There's also, obviously not like a level play field for everyone, right? Some folks have less access to, the money to mint or, to computers or the knowledge or online access. And so there's also, that's another problem, right? But even for those that do have the access and everything, it's still hard, right, to get. So definitely helps to have been, early in the space for sure.
How do you think people should go about understanding the value of generative art? Look, I'm not an artist. I don't understand art very well. So you're talking to somebody who is completely not just new to this space. Like, it's not about how long you've been in it. It's about whether you really apply yourself to going deeply into, understanding this type of art and being able to look at something and say, yeah, this is why it's so valuable, right? Like, what makes some generative art more valuable than others, other than the fact that there's the artist that is established? There was when I wrote a book about the future of work. It's called Career Fear and How to Beat It, and in it I talk about this example of art that was generated completely by by code, by computers, but like no human intervention. And in many cases, when it was displayed in a exhibition next to work that is created by humans, not only people couldn't tell the difference, but in many cases they thought that the art that wasn't created by humans was nicer, and people would buy it for a higher price. So, what makes art art, and how do we value it if it's generated by computers?
Yeah, excellent question. So yeah, I think like as long as there's the intent, right, and the creativity, then it is art, right? Like I don't think, we should be very restrictive on how we define what is or what isn't art, right? Because at the end of the day, it's if there's one person that is touched by that art piece, then it has accomplished its mission, right? um Different artists make art for different purposes, right? And different pieces or collections of theirs also have different purposes, right? So some of my collections were very purposeful, right? And some others are more like just and I'm trying to do my best at that, right? But in terms of how we value it, I'm definitely not an expert either. But I would share maybe some of the things that I'm a collector as well, right? Like so some of the things I look at, right? Personally, first off, I have to like it personally, right? So if I don't like the work, then I don't typically collect it, right? There's some collectors that are more like speculative in nature, and that's fine, right? That's just not what I do, right? Like, so I have to subjectively, personally like it if I'm going to collect something. But beyond that, which you can't quantify that, like, then obviously there's some data points that you can look at, but like, is it a well-known artist? What has been his previous work? What has his or her previous work sold for, right? If it was like a one of one or like part of a collection, how many editions, or and so on, right? So if you do have those data points, that is always like very, very helpful, right? If you don't, then it becomes a little trickier, right? uh if that artist is a traditional artist, that also helps obviously, and you get like similar data points, although maybe harder to find them, right? Or you can still hopefully find them. But if it's like a more of a known artist, right, then you can start trying to get to that by proxy, right? Like, has he collaborators? You collaborated with other artists, or what else have they done in their career? Or which platforms, in the case of NFTs or Web3, have they published on, right? So obviously, platforms that are heavily curated and where other really big artists have published are going to carry some implicit value in those works, right? Like, so if you have an art blocks project, for instance, there's already some immediate values just by being on art blocks, because so I actually published a project on art blocks, and just kind of being in the platform, right? It's a whole process, right? Like there's an application, there's a process to get in as an artist, and then there's a process to submit your work as an artist, and then there's a curation board that will review and class the project, and so on, right? So that's another way you can go at it, at valuing it, right? After that, it gets trickier and trickier. But it depends on the genre. You can also try and see the skills, right? So in terms of kind of the more traditional skills, like you can think of, and again, I'm not an expert at all here, but can you look at the brushwork? What is the perspective? What is the overall balance of the work, the composition? Like, does it look like in good harmony? Does it follow, are the colors pleasant? Does it follow like a good balance of like colors and theory at the shades? Like, what is the actual message? What do you feel like? There's all these things that you can kind of try, and different angles from which you can try to appreciate the art, right? What drives your attention initially, and then are there other things that you discover as you're kind of appreciating that artwork for a little while, and all these little things. So like, this is kind of like just kind of going back to some basics, right? But obviously on generative art itself, then you might be trying to look at the technique, right? Are they using some of the kind of classic techniques or algorithms, right? And if they do, are they doing a good job at it, or is it kind of a copy of something that you've already seen? And then obviously it's going to be a little less valuable than if it's something like completely innovative, right? So I guess there are some parameters that you can look at to try and kind of think through
tell me a little bit about becoming a proof artist. What was the process? How does that happen? You know, I'm trying to kind of understand what that means exactly, being a proof artist. So my reference or comparison in my head is like being a Steinway artist. So because I've worked with Steinway, so I know that process. So like if Steinway is like, you know, the pinnacle of musical instruments, I'm guessing, you know, we could think that, you know, proof has been the pinnacle of Web3 art space and support for artists. So with Steinway, it's like, first of all, you need to have a Steinway. You can't be a Steinway artist if you don't own a Steinway. And then you need to be only making a living from music, you know, you need to reach a certain level of excellence and recognition. So is it similar? How does that work? And how many proof artists are there, do you know?
Yeah, so first off, I'd love to have Steinway. But I do love my Yamaha, for the record. But yeah, so for me, I don't know if there's like different classifications within it, but for me it was a very organic and like very natural process, right? So what happened to me, and I can't speak for others because I really don't know, but yeah, what happened to me was like Kevin, so Kevin Rose, who's the Proof founder. And by the way, love Proof. It's an amazing community. I love spending my time there. And I've learned so much from so many folks in there, including yourself. Like it's just wonderful, right? And love connecting with everyone there. Been following the project since, you know, kind of day one, and the whole ecosystem around Proof, and it's really wonderful. Everything they created, it's amazing. And for me, it was very organic. Like I was saying, Kevin took interest in my original collection, CryptoArte collection. And him and I chatted a couple of times, and he's like, "Hey, you want to be on the show?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course, would love to." It was huge help in terms of, you know, kind of bringing awareness to my work and my art. And he's just like, it's so generous. He's like so nice to, you know, interact with. And he was, you know, super helpful. He's like, "Yeah, I'll get you on the show." And then after being on the show, he invited me to their Discord that they had early on, which was basically like just some of his friends and you know, some really big names on the space, and a few other artists and previous podcast guests, right, from his show. So like I was really lucky to find myself and within, you know, all this like incredibly talented and successful folks. And one day he's like, "Hey, we're gonna do Proof." So what's Proof? And then, so, you know, Proof launched, and that Discord kind of evolved into what Proof is today. So the artists that were there, because they were previous hosts, like basically were granted these roles, right? Like, and so that's really all that happened. There was no, you know, application, or it was very organic. So I guess somehow curated by the team, but they were like, "Hey, we'll give you the role." I'm like, "Yeah, great." And that's it. There's no, you know, no formalities or no commitment or no process or application. At least that's how it happened to me. Maybe now it's different because obviously, you know, things kind of blew up, right? Like now it's gigantic, right? So it might be a little bit different now, but that's how it happened. Very grateful that, you know.
That it happened. Yeah, that's sweet. So were you part of the first Grails? And can you, for people who are listening to this who have no idea what Grails is, can you explain a little bit what it is?
Yeah, sure. So I was not part of the first Grails. And yeah, it's a fantastic project from Proof. And so the concept is that all the Proof members get to mint a grail, right? And a grail is an artwork, a piece by one of the participating artists. So we have 25 artists that are submitting work. Those are artists that are invited by Proof, right? And then they'll submit work, and then the Proof Collective members get to mint them, right? They get to pick one, and but they don't know who the artist is, right? Like, and that's a lot of fun for sure. I mean, we kind of like go on weeks trying to speculate and guess who the artist might be, and sometimes the community is right and sometimes it's wrong. So it's a lot of fun to watch. I really enjoy it. I mint mine on the first one. It was from What Is Real, and I really like the piece, and so really happy with it, and excited to see the second one now getting started.
Yeah, super exciting. So when you as an artist, when you are in the proof Discord, the artists have got a green, like a bright green color for their color code for their names. What does that do for you, being there? And now that the Discord has expanded thanks to Moonbirds, does that give you more exposure and how has that impacted you?
Yeah, of course. So from the moment that the CryptoArte episode went on the Proof podcast, that was already like a huge help, right? Just by Kevin's following and like his audience. He's done an amazing job at helping artists gain more exposure, right? And help them tell their stories, and like that's really helpful. I feel blessed to be there and to be part of Proof Collective, and I'm also a member. I'm still a holder as well, and I just love being there. And yeah, it's very helpful actually to it's not that color. It's also you get access to like artist channels where you can post your work, and just being able to put your work in front of such a curated community that really cares for the space and for art and it's genuine. And just being able to interact with everyone there, I just learned so much just for being there, right? Like interacting with folks of different natures. So like as we have folks with varied backgrounds, right? All the ways from entrepreneurs to artists to engineers to traders to doctors, and like it's just that such an amazing group, right? So yeah, I mean it's super valuable. I guess from many angles, just like the shared exposure and recognition, but also kind of the feedback and the learning and the interaction and seeing how everyone thinks about so many different topics and different artwork and artists, and it's been incredibly helpful for sure. And as I'm building now, we're building an art platform, right? It's a pretty ambitious goal that we have to really have help up and coming artists and make a very innovative platform we can chat more about later, but also want to bring more of established artists as well, right? And like we're working on building different models to kind of hopefully do both things, right? To get the really kind of more established artists to publish on the platform because that elevates everyone, right? But also help up and coming artists, right? Getting discovered and giving them exposure. So in a sense, I'm also doing a similar thing from that perspective, right? But yeah, I'm like super appreciative and like super thankful for being there, and like it's obviously given me a little bit of a platform that otherwise I wouldn't have had, right? There's a lot of platforms out there where you can kind of self-publish, right? Like so platforms like OpenSea or Rarible, they're amazing, they're great, but then as an artist you're kind of on your own on marketing your work, right? There's other platforms that do a little bit more for you, like maybe like Foundation is a little bit does a couple more things for you, but not that much really. You still need to kind of market your work and your name. And you have other platforms that will do a lot more, like art blocks, right? Then you get a lot more credibility, you get a lot more exposure. They'll do like a Twitter Spaces, and it's kind of being on that platform kind of elevates your brand, and you get the exposure to their collectors, right? Um, but there's other communities like Proof that also help you kind of build your audience and get more established, right? So well, it's all helpful. There's very different, I guess, platforms and different spaces, obviously.
Do you find that people really care about the artist, like in the Discord? How does it feel for you when people look at the art and like they just think about the price and what they can sell it for, or if they're keeping it, the price it plays such a big part. Is that stressful? How does it feel?
Yeah. So most of the times I don't pay attention to the price my art is selling for. I try not to. People obsessed with floor prices, and floor price per se is already like a metric that doesn't say much, right? Because anyone can go and list something for whatever they want, right? Um, doesn't mean that it's sold for that or that will sell for that, right? So that's to start with. The stressful part, I would say, only comes when as soon as you have like any significant size community, there will always be someone that's unhappy in the Web3 world, right? Like it doesn't matter how good you are, how amazing your project is, or how transparent or honest. Like it's just a matter of there will be FUD. Like somebody will FUD the project or something or the art, and it just kind of comes with the space, unfortunately. So with the time, you kind of learn to ignore some of the naysayers, but here the ones that have like constructive criticism. So like sometimes I get some of my collectors or fans that will have a valid point. It's like, hey, Seb, why didn't you, I don't know, do a raffle for this instead of allocate it to? It's like, oh yeah, I guess that would have been a better approach, right? And so you just learn, and I'm always more than open to I have my own Discord, and we have about 3,000 or something folks in there. Not all active, of course, but I listen to them all the time. We have channels that are for collectors only, where you have to hold, for instance, like a CryptoArte or a given number of crypto artists to be in that channel. And obviously, those are kind of a little bit more intimate because it's like a smaller group, right? And you have the public, where like everybody's welcome to come and participate and give feedback. And like, as an artist, at the beginning, it was sometimes a little frustrating when somebody will come and like, from like a pure speculative, play, it's a difference, right? Like, whereas like somebody coming from like a pure speculative place, it's like, hey, the floor went down. I was like, well, and so like this is never an investment vehicle. This was art, right? Like art still remains the same, it hasn't changed, right? You choosing to treat it as and a speculative asset was your own decision, and that's fine. Like, go do that, but don't come to me telling me the floor went down, right? So that's the part that I would say at the beginning maybe sometimes was stressful, because you have all this other actors, I'm out of control. Like I don't control if somebody's trying to do a pump and dump, or somebody's saying some crazy things that may not be true or may be true or whatever, right? Like it's just part of the space, right? And then with time, like you learn as an artist to like kind of you just ignore some of the naysayers, and the conversations that aren't like meaningful or constructive, right? And really pay attention to your fans that really are worth it, and like are true fans, and like really care for the art or for the projects or for the artist, right? And there's tons of those. The only little problem is that the other 5 are super loud, right? So he always like typically have those very, very small, and then this is across like most of the communities, right? Like you always have like a very small handful of people that either because they have their own agenda or because whatever, right? They'll like, the naysayers, and they're typically very loud, and then you just have to learn to ignore them, or, let them be, or ban them, or whatever.
Definitely. It must, I can only imagine how stressful it must be as an artist, because like you have to, especially when you start out, right? Because you have to focus on your craft, and now you also have to market yourself, and you have to also worry about the floor price dropping and all of that stuff. What does a day in the life of Seb look like? What do you do? Like, you wake up in the morning, okay, I'm gonna make myself a coffee, and then I'm gonna sit down and like so you just sit behind the computer all day coding and creating art. Is that what it looks like? Because you said that you're an entrepreneur as well, so tell me about that part.
Yeah. So that actually plays a big role for me. That's a little bit different, right? Because for artists that are up and coming, and artists, all they're trying to do, or they're trying to make a living out of, like that's all they do. It actually is a lot more stressful, right? It's a lot more difficult, right? Because like you put yourself in their shoes, and like they're gonna try and like make the art. Then they may have to actually pay some ETH to mint it, depending on the platform they're using, right? And then they have to market it, and then they have to wait, and then maybe, just maybe, if they get lucky, they may sell the work, right? And then maybe they have to pay to accept the ETH, the offer, depending on the platform as well. And then after all is said and done, they may have some profits or not, right? And so they like definitely a very, very stressful, proposition. unless you're already well off, unless you already made it, then it's different, right? But for artists that are up and coming, it's actually really tough, right? Because just the mental stress of like, you're kind of producing all this work. You don't really know if you're going to sell it or not, or how much you're going to sell it for, how long is it going to take, and so on and so on, right? So you see why like a lot of artists there was, talking about, mental health as well as accessibility and, inclusion, diversity, all of these topics come because there's a reason why, right? Like it is actually not as easy, and it's not all roses, right? But in my case it's different, right? Like, so I'm very grateful. I'm lucky that I've had like an entrepreneurial and engineering career that's been relatively successful. I built about 7 different businesses, and had my share of quite a few of those that I had to close. They, I don't call them failures because you're a fellow entrepreneur. You just learn and get better, and then sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's business model, sometimes it's whatever it is, right? Like it's just natural. Then only a few will make it, right? So you just learn and keep learning. But I've had success, and like my typical day nowadays, what I do is I have a software development agency, and so we have a business that I founded in 2015 that started as a product company. Actually, the product, the technology of the product, the platform kind of worked. The business model didn't, so we pivoted into services, which was part of the original value. There was a services component to the company. We it into a full service business, and so we have about we've been up to like 15 developers. There's a friend of mine. We're a very good close friend of mine. He's our CTO, and I'm founder and CEO, and so we run this business from Texas, and we have about 10 to 15 developers in Latin America, and we build custom software mostly for entrepreneurs and for kind of visionary entrepreneurs and early stage startups. Well, a couple larger clients as well, but our focus is in very early stage companies and entrepreneurs. And nowadays we're doing a lot of Web3. So we actually done the technology behind many different Web3 projects, and I also advise a few companies in the space. So that's kind of my main focus from career perspective. That probably takes me anywhere from like 5-6 hours of my day, and then the rest I spend it creating and doing art. And somewhere in between there, I also work on my own art platform, which is a separate business. It's called StudioUno. So the software development company is called ChimiChurri. The art platform is called StudioUno, and we kind of balance that a little bit, and then whatever time I have left, I work on my own art as well.
Nice. So tell me about the StudioUno. What's that about?
Yeah. So StudioUno is a new NFT art platform where we're trying to solve some of the challenges for those up and coming artists, and we're trying to build kind of a different art platform. It's very inclusive, diverse. The StudioUno name comes from like it's kind of one studio for all, right? And so our first project was called Norte. And the idea there is I explored co-creation with our collectors. So as a generative artist, I built a generative art, but I also gave control to our collectors and our community to input some of those variables into the programs to alter the artwork, right? So they get to co-create with me and also all together as they're creating the collection, right? So this one you can still mint it. It's at StudioUno.io. And that's the first project that I created to kind of bootstrap the company. I've been basically bootstrapping and investing my own funds on building the platform. And as we did that, we're now to the point where we can actually launch other projects. And so there's a couple of projects, upcoming projects that we've been working on for a while. And it's going to be 2 projects that are intertwined. Can't share too much yet, but soon enough. One project will have mostly all of it be my own art. And then the other project will be all by participating artists. So we are acquiring art from artists that we're inviting into the project currently. we already acquired a few. There's others on the work, and yeah, it's going to be some fun dynamics in between. We're trying to find this balance where we bring in artists from all over the place. A lot of them are up and coming, and not only generative artists, but a variety of different styles. So yeah, it's in the works. It's exciting.
What's the future for you in Web3? What do you think will happen to generative art in this space, and what kind of impact do you want to have on this space as new people come into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so with the platform, with StudioUno, my ideal would be that it continues to grow and we can really make a difference for lots of up and coming artists, right? Like to really make a difference to them. We're barely now starting to work with other artists, right? And that's really, really exciting. We're putting together the team. We have a couple advisors, and we're bringing in more talent soon. We have one engineer that has been working on it for a while as well, and my CTO and I as well. So we're kind of building out the team, and we're going to be publishing more projects. One of the big differences that we're with other platforms that we're going for, and that's kind of where I see that future, right, of generative art going, is that our platform is not, so every project is different, right? So most of the platforms, they basically have like one very generic smart contract that is capable of managing multiple projects, right? Which is great in terms of it being scalable, and that's great for a business model as well. But it's not great from an artistic perspective, right? Because what I see happening a lot is that, you have a lot of artists that not necessarily understand or can, build on the technology, right? Because it's challenging, it's difficult, it's not easy, right? And then you have a lot of developers and engineers that understand the technology really well and can build on this space, but don't necessarily have the artistic either skills or inspiration, better said, right? So what I'm trying to do is build a platform that the technologists and the artists really work together, right? So the way I like to describe this is, imagine it's like you're an artist. I give you this canvas, right? Like, and it's like this black canvas or white canvas, 12 by 12, right? And like, hey, you gotta paint me here, right? And here's your materials, and here's your brushes, and here's your colors. And you're like, okay, well, I have some freedom within that, right? But my boundaries have been described, right? Like you can paint outside that canvas, right? Or use other materials. And now imagine as an artist, I come and say, hey, here's a warehouse. What do you want? What do you need, right? And you have infinite budget, right? Just for fun, right? Then the equation completely changes, right? What you are going to create as an artist is going to be completely different, right? And maybe there will be music and light and interactivity and different displays and sculptures and like, who knows, right? Like the possibilities are a lot larger, right? The combinatorics, right, of what you can build. So the same idea as what you're trying to build is, can we really get creative with the technology as well, right? So that if you're an artist and we work together with you at StudioUno, we might, we might, we might create a different smart contract, and we might create a different user experience and backend and all the technology pieces that go together with that NFT collection that enable it to behave completely different, right? An example for Norte is like if you have a Norte, you can actually go and update your artwork, and when you do, sometimes the algorithm mutates as well, right? Well, you can't do that on OpenSea, you can't do that on Artblocks or like because the smart contract doesn't support it, right? And that's just like one example, right? But there's a lot of things that can be done from the technology that can really help project that artistic concept, right? So like the artistic concept can actually bleed into the the technology, the smart contract, the code, the UX, the backend, and all things. And there's some artists that are doing that, but they're very few and far between because it takes a lot of different skills to be able to do all of those things right by yourself. So what we're trying to do is build teams and build the technology that enable us to work with artists in a more creative and more fluid, more dynamic scenario where we can create very unique projects, which means we're not going to publish, 2,000 projects a year. Obviously, it's going to be a lot, less projects, but each of them is going to be a lot more unique, right? And have their own, really like full blown artistic and technological concept behind them. But that's just us. That's one of the things, right? I think the platforms will continue to evolve and also give more control to artists as well. And you start seeing that sometimes with like async is a good example. Async art, they've done a good job at like building some tools to enable creators to be a little bit more creative with how they mix and match, and create the different kind of generative parts of their work, right? So a lot of that. For me, I think I will continue to create on my own as well because I love doing that. We were just discussing earlier, I'm into music as well. So I'm actually really excited because we got a larger place. That's why my vaults are empty. It's a new place, but I'm actually going to be building a recording studio here to record and compose a little more music. So I'm excited to get more into music. I've done some NFTs that have music, but definitely it's an area that I'm passionate about. I want to start doing more of that. So, a little bit of everything. StudioUno will continue to evolve. We'll bring in more artists, publish more projects, and you'll start seeing more of like the uniqueness of those projects. On the personal side, unique of my own artistic career, I'll publish some there. I'll publish other projects on other platforms, but I also, want to start exploring my music side a little bit more.
What a life. It's very nice. I love it. I love it. So you wake up every morning with a passion for what you like, and you're doing what you love. This is a real luxury to have, honestly, and it's so nice. I love what I do so much. People always tell me, "Why do you work so much?" And I'm like, I don't feel like I'm working. I really love it so much. I enjoy it, and it's the best place to be. Let's hope that more and more artists can find their place in this new space, in this Web3 space, and take control of their artistic careers and be able to make a living from it without intermediaries. It's a very empowering space, and I'm hoping that people will listen to this interview and gain inspiration for what is possible. And of course, you had some luck, you were early, but luck comes by putting yourself in the right place at the right time, right? And we are still very early in this space, so there are a lot of opportunities for people. So any last words for artists listening to this, or people who are thinking about buying digital art or generative art?
Absolutely, yeah. So for artists, I would say just go for it. Don't be shy. This space is super welcoming. Connect with fellow artists. Hey, connect with me. I'm always happy to help. Like if I can help in any way, and I think you'll find that a lot of the artists on the space are like that as well. Like I may be busy or whatever, like just write me and I'll like reply. So yeah, just don't be shy. The information, the knowledge, it's all out there and it's free, right? Like you can find it in so many different places, right? Like you can learn everything that you need to know to get on Web3 and NFTs, just by just putting in the effort. Really, it doesn't cost much, and you can even get started on like Tesos or Solana if you want to, get started with less funds, right? So yeah, just as an artist, if you want to, go for it. It's all out there. It's easy. There's tons of support. The communities are amazing, and I would highly recommend it. And then for collectors, if it's the first NFT that you're collecting, it can be daunting, right? Because there's also a lot to learn. So I would suggest, probably get on some Discords, talk to some folks, before, you do. Don't start with like anything that's, like a huge percent of your net worth, right? Like buy something that you like, and that if you're kind of more on the speculated side, just play with money that you can afford to lose, right? Like if you're buying for yourself as an art piece, then buy something you like, right? If you're kind of getting more into the space of trading, just make sure that you can afford to lose it until like you start learning a little bit more, and don't overextend yourself, because that's where folks get in trouble, right? So
Yeah.
not financial advice, not artistic advice.
Yeah, exactly. And also it's one of those things that, yeah, that applies to everything, whether you're talking about NFTs, whether you're talking about, crypto stocks or whatever. Like always just buy as much as you can actually afford to lose.
Yeah.
Where can people find you, Seb?
Yeah. So on Twitter, I'm CryptoArte on Twitter. So crypto and ARTE. And they can just follow me there. They can just also email me, and it's very simple. It's hello@cryptoarte.io. And that's the website where my original collection from 2018 is at. It's on cryptoarte.io. And then the art platform is StudioUno.io. So that's StudioUno.io.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Seb. This was so interesting, and I learned so much. The more I get into this space, the more I start to appreciate it. So thank you for being here and for all the work you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Sebastián Brocher. Be sure to check out his work and follow him on Twitter. I will put the links in the show notes. The full interviews are also available on my YouTube channel, The Somi Arian Show.